We used to sleep on the beach here. Sleep
This is a
overnight.
memoir I
I never
wrote
go
called A
there
Pillar of
anymore.
Strength.
Things changed.
It's the first time I've ever really talked about my childhood, I
They
guess.
don't sleep anymore on
I
the
hope you like
beach.
it. I used to have a lot of reconstructive leg surgeries on my hips, knees, and ankles when I was a child and a teenager. I was in and out of school all the time. Whenever it was time for a surgery, I wouldn't understand how they had come to that conclusion because I just felt that my legs always hurt and I couldn't walk far in general. I couldn't understand what the changed condition was to merit action. I would always say I wouldn't sign the surgery consent forms, but my parents would sign them anyway, which made me feel stripped of any personal rights and resent my parents further. When I was a kid, I had a lot of trouble at home with my parents, causing me to be extremely anxious and withdrawn. None of my schools ever noticed, which made me kind of mad because I was suffering mentally, but the only tending to my being was physical. Checkups, surgeries, body casts, physical therapy, and I was isolated in my suffering. Adults would call me brave and inspirational, which made me feel like a freak of medicine. I remember when I was 5 and I woke up in my first hip spica body cast. I couldn't move my legs at all. I started crying and said to my parents, "I can't move my legs," to which they both responded by crying, resulting in my decision that me crying wasn't an option anymore. It upset other people. Come here, man. That's when I started pretending everything was always fine. It was my job to go through all of my early life pretending that everything was fine. I never complained about my physical or mental pain. One time, when I was staying at the hospital for a month or two, it was 6 hours from home, so I had long stays. I met a little girl with long blonde hair wearing her nightgown. She looked so healthy, but I kept seeing her day after day, and she was using a wheelchair. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me she had a hole in her heart. I remember thinking how scary that was, but at the same time, beautiful and poetic. I had a hole in my heart too. I felt like if I had a more serious condition, maybe I could appreciate the endless surgeries. I really liked her and was scared for her every day. The day she was well enough to go home was a huge relief to me. Over the years, I got used to having sick children as friends. It was something we all had in common, and despite the fact that there was a sort of kinship amongst us, I still never fully opened up to anyone, and I still felt like the loner. My sister was traumatized by my mother and I always being away together, and she was resentful of all the attention I was given, having to be carried around, and she started complaining of her legs hurting so she could be carried too. Sick kids was the norm for me, but it wasn't the norm for my school friends. I remember being jealous of their walking and how they were allowed to just be kids, not pillars of strength. Later on in my teens, I started to wonder if some kids only wanted to be friends with me because of the surgeries, the wheelchairs, the walkers, and the crutches. I had a girlfriend who clearly used my life to feel better about her own and always acted like she was my savior after every surgery, showering me with gifts that she usually stole from the gift shop, sneaking me out for cigarettes, etc. And she always claimed to have so many medical problems, seeming to turn even that aspect of my life into a contest, and may the best man win. As I aged out of my teenage years, I was treated like a faker by medical professionals, and like the real problem I had was Munchausen syndrome by peers. It makes me so upset that people assumed I spent my childhood in the hospital only to fabricate illnesses, both physical and mental, in my adulthood. These conditions are all related to each other. I just had a hip surgery this past May. I do not have a definitive point to this memoir. It is merely the first time I've ever tried to communicate what I went through as a child, because we all have our stories. And this is my core, the first of my stories that need be lain out for examination by others with their own stories. The end.